Story 1. The Black Horn in the Fog. I never believed in unicorns. Not the way kids did, anyway. The kind in fairy tales, all pearly white with flowing manes, symbols of purity and magic. But what I saw wasn't something out of a bedtime story. It was something that crawled out of a nightmare. I was driving through the back roads of northern Pennsylvania, a stretch of twisting, fog-laced asphalt between endless trees. It was late, past midnight, and I was running on fumes, both my gas tank and my body. There wasn't a single car on the road, and the world outside my headlights was nothing but swirling mist. Then, I saw movement, a shape, standing at the edge of the road, just where my headlights faded into the dark. It was a horse, or so I thought at first, but something was wrong. Its body was long, too long. Its legs were spindly, almost stretched, as if something had taken a normal horse and pulled it like taffy. And then, there was the horn. Not white, not golden, black, twisted like a corkscrew and far too long, nearly as long as its head. The thing turned toward me, and I swear to God, its eyes were hollow pits, like a mask carved out of flesh. I hit the brakes. The car skidded, and for a second, I thought I was going to hit it. But when I looked back up, it was gone. Not gone as in it ran off into the trees. Just gone. I sat there, panting, gripping the wheel. My pulse slammed against my skull. My mind tried to make sense of what I had seen. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe exhaustion was making me hallucinate. Then, my car stalled. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. And in that horrible, suffocating silence, I heard something move. Hooves. Slow. Measured. Coming closer. I didn't dare look in the mirror. I didn't dare turn my head, but I felt it. The weight of something standing just outside my driver's side window. A long, ragged breath rattled against the glass. I turned the key. Nothing. Again. Nothing. The hooves scraped the asphalt. I slammed my palm against the wheel, whispering frantic prayers. Then, with a shuddering gasp, the engine roared back to life. I hit the gas so hard I nearly lost control. My tires screeched against the pavement as I sped away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I never looked back. But the worst part? When I got home, I found something on my car. A long, black sliver, sharp as a needle, lodged into the back fender like something had struck it or pierced it. I don't drive those roads anymore. Story 2. The Bone-White Beast of Blackwood Lake. I was 17 when I saw it. A unicorn, if you could even call it that. Back then, I spent summers at my uncle's cabin near Blackwood Lake, a remote, barely touched body of water deep in the Maine woods. No cell service, no neighbors for miles. Just me, my uncle, and the sound of the trees shifting in the wind. One evening, just before sundown, I took the canoe out onto the lake. The water was still as glass, reflecting the burning orange sky above. Everything was peaceful, until the forest went silent. No birds, no insects, not even the rustling of the leaves. Just dead, unnatural quiet. Then I saw the ripples. Something moved beneath the water, something big. A dark shape swam just beneath the surface, circling my canoe. I gripped my paddle, frozen, watching as it passed underneath. And then, it rose. A head broke through the water, pale as bone, followed by the curve of a long, equine body. Its skin wasn't smooth but cracked, like dried clay, and where a normal horse's eyes should have been, this thing had pits of solid black. And its horn, it was jagged, spiraled the wrong way, like something twisted by force. The moment I saw it, my body went ice cold. I knew, instinctively, this thing wasn't supposed to exist. The unicorn exhaled, water spilling from its gaping nostrils. Its ears flicked, and then it turned toward me. That's when I saw them. Hands. Not hooves, but hands, pale and sickly, hanging limply from where its legs should have been. The fingers twitched, curling and uncurling as if grasping for something unseen. I paddled. Fast. I didn't care where I went. I just moved. My hands shook so badly I could barely keep my grip. The unicorn let out a sound, something between a shriek and a horse's scream. The noise made my eardrums ache, vibrating through my skull like nails on glass. I felt the canoe rock violently. It was following me. I didn't stop, didn't turn. I paddled harder than I ever had in my life, my arms screaming, my lungs burning. Then, silence. I reached the shore, panting, my body trembling so hard I could barely stand. I turned back to the water. The lake was calm, smooth as a mirror. No sign of it. I stumbled back to the cabin, my uncle watching from the porch with a strange look on his face. I told him what I'd seen, expecting him to laugh, to tell me it was my imagination, but he just nodded. "I saw it too," he said, "when I was your age. I never set foot in that lake again, and I don't think I ever will." Story 3. The Hollow Horned One. I was a park ranger in Montana's Bitterroot Mountains when I saw it. My job mostly involved patrolling the deep woods, maintaining trails, and making sure hikers didn't get lost. It was routine, until one summer evening, when a call came through the radio. A group of campers had reported seeing a sick horse wandering the forest near their site. They claimed it was thin, almost skeletal, with a strange growth on its head. I figured it was just a malnourished wild horse, or maybe an elk with an injury. So, I hiked out to their location just as dusk settled over the trees. The moment I arrived, I felt it. Something was wrong. The air was heavy, thick, like the forest itself was holding its breath. The campers were visibly shaken, packing their things in a hurry. One of them, a man in his 40s, grabbed my arm and whispered, "Don't go looking for it." I ignored him and pressed on. It didn't take long to find the tracks. Deep hoof prints pressed into the dirt, leading off trail. I followed them, my flashlight cutting through the growing darkness. Then, the trees opened into a clearing, and there it was, a unicorn, or something trying to be one. Its body was wrong, long, bony, with patches of dull, grayish fur peeling away to expose raw flesh. Its head was too narrow, too stretched, like the skull beneath had been reshaped by something unnatural. And the horn, it wasn't solid. It was hollow, a spiraled, gaping cavity, like a tunnel carved straight through the bone of its forehead. A faint whispering sound came from within, something that made my stomach lurch, as if the horn itself was drawing breath. Then, it turned toward me. Its eyes were missing. In their place were deep, black pits, swirling with something I could not comprehend. I took a step back. My boot snapped a twig. The unicorn's head twitched sharply at the sound. Then, it started walking toward me. Not galloping, walking. Each hoof step was slow, deliberate, crunching against the leaves like the ticking of a clock. The whispering from its horn grew louder, shifting into something almost recognizable. Words, half-formed and ancient, spoken in a voice that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. I didn't wait to hear what it was saying. I turned and ran. Branches whipped my face, my heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs would crack. I could still hear it behind me, the sound of hooves on earth, the unnatural murmuring winding its way into my skull. Then, silence. I stopped, turned. Nothing. The clearing was empty. The tracks ended abruptly, as if the thing had simply vanished. I made it back to the campers, breathless, and told them to pack up and leave immediately. I followed them all the way to the trailhead, not daring to look back. I reported the sighting to my supervisor the next day. He listened, then nodded, like he already knew. "Stay out of those woods at night," he told me. I took his advice, and I never patrolled that area again. Story 4. The Bleeding White Stag. I grew up in a small town in Vermont, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. Dense forests surrounded us, old and untouched, with trails that stretched for miles into the wilderness. I knew those woods like the back of my hand, or at least I thought I did. One October evening, just as the leaves had turned to fire, I was out hiking alone. The sun was setting, casting long shadows between the trees, but I wasn't worried. I had walked this path 100 times. Then, I heard the hoofbeats. At first, I thought it was a deer. The sound was distant, rhythmic, but something about it was off. The steps were too heavy, too deliberate, like whatever was making them wasn't just moving, but hunting. I stopped, listening. The forest was dead silent. No wind, no birds, just those slow, pounding hoofbeats getting closer. Then, I saw it. A stag. Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe it was. Its body was stark white, unnaturally so, almost glowing in the dim light. Its legs were long and thin, its hooves black as ink. But what made my stomach twist was the horn. Not antlers. A single spiraled horn jutted from its forehead, sharp and jagged. It was cracked, and from those cracks, something dark and thick oozed, a deep, blackish red, like old, clotted blood. Then, it grinned at me. Its lips curled back, revealing jagged, yellow teeth. That was when I realized it wasn't breathing. I stepped back. My boot crunched against the leaves, and the creature reacted instantly. Its head snapped toward me, and then it charged. I ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life. My pulse hammering, my lungs burning. I could hear it behind me, the thunder of hooves, the wet squelching of whatever was dripping from its horn. The path blurred under my feet, trees whipping past me in a dizzying tunnel of reds and oranges. I could feel it getting closer, could hear its ragged, hollow breaths just behind me. Then, I tripped. I hit the ground hard, knocking the wind from my lungs. I scrambled to turn over, expecting to see that twisted face looming over me. But there was nothing. The forest was still, silent. The thing was gone. I sat there, shaking, gasping for breath. My mind struggled to process what had just happened. Then, I saw the hoof prints. Deep, gaping impressions in the dirt, leading right up to where I had fallen. But there was no sign of the creature itself, just a single, dark stain on the ground, thick, blackish red, and still warm. I never told anyone what I saw, but every autumn, when the leaves turn to fire, I hear it again. The slow, rhythmic pounding of hooves in the distance, and I know it's still watching. Story 5. The Unicorn That Wasn't. I was 12 when I saw it. It happened on my grandfather's farm in rural Kentucky. His land stretched for miles. Rolling fields, dense woods, and an old barn that had been there longer than anyone could remember. My parents had dropped me off for the summer, and I spent most days exploring. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I wandered too far. I had been following a deer trail through the tall grass when I spotted something ahead, something standing at the edge of the tree line. A horse. No, not a horse. It was too white, its skin like fresh snow, almost glowing in the dim light. Its mane was long, tangled, and moving, even though there was no wind. And then there was the horn. Long, spiraled, too sharp. A unicorn. I should have been amazed. I should have run back to the house, screaming for my grandfather. But I couldn't move, because something was wrong. It wasn't grazing. It wasn't moving. It was just staring at me. Its eyes weren't right. Too big, too dark. Then, it opened its mouth, and it spoke. Not words, not a voice. A sound. A deep, vibrating hum that made my teeth ache, that crawled into my bones like cold fingers. I took a step back. The unicorn twitched. Its body snapped unnaturally, its legs bending wrong, like a puppet on broken strings. It took a step forward. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, through the fields, over the fence, toward my grandfather's house. I didn't stop until I was inside, slamming the door behind me. My grandfather saw my face. He knew something was wrong. "What did you see?" he asked. I told him. He didn't laugh. He didn't question it. He just locked the doors, pulled the curtains, and said, "If you ever see it again, don't run. Don't speak. Just close your eyes." I never asked why. I never wanted to know. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard it outside. The sound, the hum. It was waiting, and I didn't dare open my eyes.